Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending OD Tug's online educational webinar series. Today, we will have a presentation titled OCI, How to Pass Certification Exams, and it will be presented by Jeff Henkel. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the questions box, and Jeff will answer accordingly. And for anyone who is looking for the recording of today's presentation, it will be available by end of day on the ODTUG website if you are an individual or corporate member. With that being said, we'll give the floor to Jeff.
Great. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody, to Cracking the Code, How to Ace the OCI Certification. I'm going to go through the certification process for kind of really any Oracle training, but these tips and tricks work for other certifications. I have been Amazon Architect certified. I've done Azure Architecture certification. And really the tips and tricks kind of work across the board, regardless of what it is you're looking to achieve in your professional career. Hopefully these ideas and thoughts will help you out. So with that said, let's dive right in. Before we get going, here's your generic normal safe harbor statement, which basically says that anything here that's Oracle specific, subject to change, and just take everything with a healthy grain of salt. It may apply today, but may not completely apply tomorrow. I talk a little bit about myself. So my name's Jeff Henkel. I'm the Director of Managed Services at iArc Solutions, where I have spent the last almost 7 years now of my career. I come from a EPM background. Originally worked at Hyperion, was acquired by Oracle, and then went out into the boutique services world, where I've been for quite a long time. But I've been in this space since 1998. So I used to have hair, as you can see. I no longer have that. A little bit about iArc Solutions. We are a full service EPM cloud solution provider as well as an AI solution provider. We have services both on the application infrastructure integration as well as day two services side. We're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 100% onshore staff of certified architects. And we are here to help you with your cloud needs or EPM needs as they may be. Just a generic slide that you see from everybody. These are just some of our customers and partners. A lot of the big firms, even including Oracle itself, they do come to us for expertise in the architecture and infrastructure side of things. And we are always happy to help out anybody in need. So let's dive into the topic at hand. It's why everybody's here, probably why a lot of us are here on our lunch break. So why do OCI certifications matter? The biggest thing I can say about certification is, everyone can read the documentation, everybody can watch videos, but it's ultimately the certification that is a true test of whether or not you have mastered or at least have a very firm grasp of the material at hand. So it's kind of a validation of real world expertise. And I'll talk about this a little more as we go on, but it's very difficult to pass these exams without some hands-on experience. As a matter of fact, for associate, I think they recommend a year of hands-on OCI cloud or Oracle cloud expertise in an actual OCI environment. And for a full professional architect, they sometimes, I think, recommend either 2 to 3 years. It's been a while since I looked at the exact verbiage. But the point being that if you're not in the tools, it's very hard to pass some of these exams because I'll have some real world questions and examples that can get a little bit tricky. Certification helps enhance your credibility and career, right? If you're applying for a job or looking for a promotion to move laterally or up within your company, having certifications on your resume, on your CV, really matters to show that you, again, have mastered the material, you're comfortable in whatever that may be. And it expands our understanding of modern cloud architecture. Now, I always spend a lot of time saying that when we start talking about cloud architecture, it's really a data center somewhere else. So if you have very firm data center knowledge background, you've run a data center or you've supported systems within a data center, you understand networking, et cetera, then chances are you coming into an OCI certification around those things is going to be very helpful. And it's probably going to ease your transition compared to somebody who perhaps is coming into some of this net new. But either way, the training and the steps I'm going to talk about will help you, whether you're a complete beginner or whether you have a pretty firm grasp of a lot of the concepts. And of course, it aligns you with Oracle's fast-growing cloud ecosystem. One of the reasons to renew certifications, um, if you've already got them, is they move quick. Oracle has extended the runtime and kind of eased the recertification process over the last couple of years. But it's important to note that, as recently as 2 years ago, there were very few AI options, if you will, within the cloud, and that has exploded exponentially. That's true across, Google Cloud, Azure, uh, AWS, or OCI. So let's talk a little bit about how Oracle views certification paths. So the most basic certification that Oracle provides is what they call the foundations. And I think the foundations is really good for folks who are going to be consumers of Oracle Cloud um, operations. So whether that's something as simple as logging into OCI to see billing, governance, things of that nature. Whether that is, I've got components that are deployed in Oracle Cloud. I want to kind of know how it works, but I won't be in there on a day-to-day basis, right? That's what foundations exist for. And then, of course, you have what they call the associate level is next. Again, this is 6 months to a year of experience in the cloud, either designing, running, or developing within that platform. And then the highest level of certification is professional. And again, this is a year plus. I would even recommend even as much as 2 to 3 before diving into the professional exams of hands-on experience and understanding large-scale complex solutions. These are full tenancies that have, multi-server, a mix of things like networking database, application servers, etc. And understanding how all that kind of connects, interrelates, and functions within Oracle Cloud. It also includes things like security, and all of the sort of provisioning and policies that go around security. And depending on what you're interested in, whether it's the architecture or the security or the AI side, there are different levels of these certification paths. So, for example, if you're, excuse me, I'm a little froggy today. If you're on the developer, DevOps, or data science side, then again, that would be a different path that you could take for associate and professional. So I'm going to focus a little bit on one example of a test. Okay. And this is the OCI Architect Associate exam, 170107224, if you want to know the current one. So a lot of the exams kind of follow this same format, which is you're going to get a lot of questions, somewhere around 50 to 60. You're going to get roughly an hour and a half for your exam that is a monitored exam, and you need a passing score of something like 65%. If you're taking something like the professional exam, those numbers go up. You'll probably get more questions, a little more time, and you will also have a higher threshold, like 80%, to pass that exam. Officially, there are no prerequisites required. You can schedule an exam right now. I think Oracle might still be running their free exams. They were for quite a while up through AI World. But either way, if there is a charge, you pay your charge and you schedule your exam and you hop in. In the case of the Architect Associate exam, some of the domains are IAM, which is Oracle's security module, networking, compute, storage, databases, high availability, a little more specific about security, in particular about how roles work and how you can write custom roles and apply them. And then, of course, monitoring an environment. And the thing that's interesting about how Oracle has changed these exams over the last couple of years is that excuse me, that it used to be that the associate was sort of an easy version, if you will, of the professional exam. So it had higher level questions, but it covered the same domain information. What they've done in the last year or so is Oracle's actually split the architect professional and the architect associate exams out into kind of different categories. So things like networking, compute, storage, those are almost entirely gone from the professional exam because it's assumed that you've passed architect associate before taking architect professional. And so architect professional is focusing on much deeper concepts and then other components of the OCI world, if you will. So let's talk a little about Oracle's official preparation resources. So regardless of what exam you're taking, and I've taken quite a few of them, um, you will find a series of classes. Free. A lot of these are free trainings. If not, you can get a subscription for the training and take the accompanying classes. So usually those will be something like 20 to, we'll say, 40 or 50 hours worth of videos that cover the entire range of topics. Watching those videos is pretty helpful, and usually each section will have a whatever I'll call it a sub quiz, right? So, for example, if you go through the networking section, you might be presented with 5 sets of quizzes, and those questions generally do come off of either the current exam or previous exams. So you have a good feel for what kind of questions are going to be answered along the way. And I do a little trick here as I go through these, and I actually screen capture all the questions and the correct answers and chuck them into a Word document that I can review prior to taking the actual final exam. And then, in addition to that, there's usually a workshop or a live lab that you can take part in. And that is guided learning through the actual interface and, for example, OCI that helps you see that, if I'm building a load balancer, for example, a networking load balancer, it'll walk you through the steps of how to build that load balancer, perhaps how to apply certificates to that load balancer, and how to legitimately deploy it in your own tenancy, just like you would if you were working for a company or doing a consulting engagement for a customer. So that can be a lot of help. And then, of course, there's tons of documentation out there. So for every area of interest you may have, there's corresponding documentation. So in the case of Architect Associate, you can go and read the how-to guide for whatever thing it is you're trying to do. So, again, I'll go back to, let's say we decide to work on storage and we're concerned about how storage works in OCI. I can break out whichever component of storage I'm most interested into and read the documentation on that and understand exactly what the available commands are, how to navigate within OCI's console, etc. And then, of course, practice exams. Oracle provides a free practice exam for every test you may be interested in taking. I highly recommend you go through those. And again, you screenshots, you take notes. If you miss a question, a lot of times you have the option to go read the associated documentation that explains what the answer should have been. And it's always good to kind of take note of that and highlight the ones that you may miss along the way so that you have the ability to manage that as needed. Okay, how do I use the exam guide? So, first things first, at the beginning of every class, there's an official objectives list. I recommend you download that. And then as you're looking at those, you can turn each objective into a question, which is, what do I need to understand about OCI security in order to probably pass this exam? And as you go through the video lessons that accompany the objectives, you can start to build out that own sort of set of internal questions that tell you where the focus is, both in the videos and in the sample questions as they pop up throughout the quizzes. I then turn around and take that and I build a little checklist that basically says, which of these things did I get right out of the gate? In other words, like maybe I have a very firm grasp of networking. And so when they start talking about IP ranges, right, I go, yeah, I already know all this. This is secondhand to me. So I don't put that on my checklist of things to review. I'm comfortable with that. But maybe I have a very shaky grasp about, we'll say, security and how to apply policies. So I'm going to add to my checklist that I need to focus on that. And then in that checklist, I can add things like go read the documentation around policies, right? And then as you go through that checklist, you can answer, okay, do I get it now? Do I need a demo? Do I need to find a third party resource that helps reinforce maybe what Oracle's not teaching me in a way I can understand? And all of that together will help start to guide how you approach these exams. So let's talk a little bit about third-party study tools. So one of my favorites, I'll start right off the gate, is Udemy. So in addition to Oracle courses, Udemy offers third-party courses about pretty much all of the topics. And if you wait for a sale, you will find that for around 12 to 15 bucks, you can get a supplementary set of courses to help you pass these exams. In addition to that, a lot of the previous years or sometimes even this year's test exams are available on Udemy. And you can buy that exam package, and it'll usually have 3 or 4 copies of the test in it with your ability to retake it time after time to understand the questions. Now, I will tell you, they're not one for one. You're not going to get the cheat of the test, be able to go memorize it, walk out the door, and pass your exam. What you will, though, see is again, sometimes 3 or 4 iterations of the same type of question that shows you how it could be worded on the Oracle exam and helps you kind of mentally prepare. Because one of the things I find when I actually get into exam day is I read a question and I go, I've seen this sort of before, but in completely different wording. And it allows me to kind of reach back into my mind and go like, okay, we're talking about overlapping CIDR ranges in networking here. I know I can't overlap CIDR ranges and have 2 networks connect. And it helps me kind of zero in on what Oracle's looking for on a given day. Excuse me. And then there's practice tests that other people put out. And you can go out and Google these. There's Whiz Labs, Exam Topics, Measure Up. There's a ton of options out there for other practice tests you can use. I, again, strongly urge you to take them up and to focus on the areas where you think you're weakest with any sort of exam. So again, if networking's a problem, focus on networking. If compute's a problem, then we need to understand compute better. And the practice exams can help you do that. A lot of them allow you to break out the questions according to topic. And then, of course, there's communities. LinkedIn has an Oracle Cloud OCI community. We actually set it up here at IARC and we approve membership. So if that's something you're interested in, go to LinkedIn, look it up. We're happy to help you out. People can talk in there about the exams, about doing things in OCI, etc. There's a subreddit for Oracle Cloud, and then there are various Discord groups. So there's a whole world out there. If you're struggling with something, if you don't understand, if you want other tips outside of me, and I highly recommend you go look for them, hop into a community and chat with people about their experience, about what, works for them to be able to take these sort of exams. And then, of course, again, the pro tip, if you're not sure about something, go back to the Oracle docs. They are your Bible of sorts, if you will. They are the written word as to how these things should work. And, a lot of times I find myself going back and reviewing things because, sure, I took an exam, 14 months ago, but I haven't had to do anything with a specific policy since then. I'm just going to go look up how the policy is built. It's faster and easier than trying to rack your brain and remember what it should be. So let me talk a little bit about my personal process. First things first, read the exam guide. That's a no-brainer. If you don't understand what the exam's going to look like and what Oracle's looking for, or whether it's Oracle or Azure or Google, or it doesn't really matter. They all kind of operate in the same fashion. It's hard to make sure you're retaining the right information. So always go back to the guide. And then next, watch the official videos. And this is the hardest part because some of these video series, again, we're talking 20 or 40 hours of commitment. And that can be very tough in your day job. And I'll share a little personal anecdote. When I got security professional certified, which was honestly the hardest of the Oracle exams I've taken, I probably watched the 40 or 50 hours of videos at the time over 3 months. And then coming up to the day of the exam, because I finally decided I had to get this thing over with and scheduled, I kind of went back and crammed on a lot of things. And it was not a cohesive way of watching the videos and training. I'd let enough time pass between watching kind of the first half and the middle half and the final half that I was very unfamiliar with the previous two-thirds or had forgotten stuff. So when I went into that exam, it was a little dicey, and I did pass, but it was a lot closer than I would have liked. I think I was whatever 10 percentage points over the passing score versus 20 or 25, which is what I normally aim for. And so I highly encourage you that when you watch these videos, try to keep in mind completing them in a time frame close to your exam date so that all the information is as fresh as it's going to be. The same is true for third-party videos. Regardless of what you're watching and how you're consuming the content, you want to stay current to your exam date. Oracle offers an OCI free tier. Azure has a free tier or accredited tier. AWS has one, they all do. So practice hands-on. When you do a thing or you watch a video on a thing that says, here's how you go build a load balancer, go build a load balancer. That says, here's how you deploy a compute on Linux, go deploy a compute on Linux. You can delete it, blow it away when you're done, but you want the experience of having touched it. I find that doing sticks in my brain much more than watching. Other people may have different learning experiences. I'm sure we all do, but you want to focus on the ability to do what it is you're trying to learn. And again, take the practice exams and review the explanations. The explanations, I think, is the biggest part that a lot of people sort of skip. You take a practice exam, maybe you miss the question, and you realize that instead of A, they wanted C. So you memorize C and you walk away. But the problem is now there's no connection to understanding why C was the answer. And you really want the understanding because tomorrow in your world, in your environment, let alone on the test, you may find that you have a similar but not quite identical solution or situation you're trying to solve for. Having the understanding allows you to go, oh yeah, this is what my practice network looked like. This is what my real corporate network looks like. And now I have to make change A versus B to make that function in a day-to-day operational space. And really understanding the concept is the key to that. It's that ability to bridge memorizing an answer and activating it in the real world. And then last, you're going to reinforce all of this with a concept called memory palaces, which I'm going to spend some slides talking about. So I consider memory palaces the secret weapon. So if you're not familiar with memory palaces, there's a lot of books out on this. It's a very old topic. It was actually pioneered by the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. And it's talked about on YouTube videos. You can go watch about how to build a memory palace, how to make them work, etc. But I'll go through it at a high level. It's also been popularized in the Sherlock Holmes BBC TV show Reboot, where Sherlock Holmes talks about using a memory palace. So you could go watch that too. It's entertaining. So the idea between a memory palace is that you take a place that you're very familiar with. Most people use their home, and you turn your physical home into a mental home for topics. And the way I do this is I associate each thing I'm trying to learn with a specific room in my home. So in this example, I take my living room and I turn my living room into a place where I store ideas about networking. So when I walk into my living room, right, what's the first thing I see? Maybe I see my couch. Maybe I see my television and I see a table. I see some chairs, and I see a couple bookcases. And what I'll do is I'll break up networking and assign each part of networking, whether that's um, IP addressing and maybe it's network load balancers. Maybe it is gateways, right? And each one of those gets assigned to a piece of furniture to subdivide it further. And I tell myself that when I think about networking and I think about overlapping um, IP ranges, for example, my couch is an IP. It's an IP range, and actually, my couch is modular. Um, and I think of my modular sectional couch, and I go, okay, I have modules, but they can't sit on top of each other. That's not a functional way to sit. So I think of the fact that when I'm building networks within my tenancy, my couch can't overlap. Therefore, my networks can't overlap. And that's just a little mnemonic memory device that allows me to keep that in mind. And maybe I look at my television and I go, okay, my television is really kind of a load balancer, right? It's going to direct traffic to one place or another. And when I turn my smart TV on, I have a variety of pointers that go to different places. I have Apple TV and I have Prime and I have YouTube TV. And those are all different pointers within my load balancer. And I allow my brain to kind of associate those things so that when I get into the exam and I go, oh gosh, how do load balancers work again? Because I've got this question in front of me that says, what is a back-end set in a load balancer? And I go, oh yeah, back-end set. It's a lot like my TV pointing to YouTube TV. My back-end set for YouTube TV is different than my back-end set for Apple TV. They go to different places. They serve different purposes, but they all come through the TV and it allows me to visualize that. And I can do the same thing in my kitchen with storage. And I can say, okay, I've got different kinds of storage, right? So, I have a storage bucket, for example. So maybe I think of my cabinets as storage buckets. And I go, okay, in my cabinets, I can have lots of pots and pans, and each pot and pan can be different. That's a different bucket, but they're all under the cabinets as the overall guide to my list of storage buckets. But each bucket's different. I put different things in a mixing bowl than I put in a pan. And that helps me memorize that. That again, when I come up with a bucket question, right? Oh, that bucket is they're asking about cold storage or archive storage. Well, I would go in archive storage in my pantry. Well, it's that Dutch oven that I use once a year to make bread, right? I almost never get that thing out. That's my archive storage. But my pot that I use or my pan that I use to cook dinner every night, right? That's my non-archive storage. That's my readily access storage. So that goes in that bucket. And then I can do the same thing. You can do the same thing with another room. You can do security and garage and say that, my overall tendency root access is being able to open the garage door. So I open my garage door, but maybe in my garage, I have a fridge and I have a safe, right? And so I separate the things that are readily accessible to anyone who's able to get into the garage and say, that's my highest level security for my admins. I can all get in the fridge. They can grab a soda. That's not a problem, right? But now who gets to manage the security? Well, that's in the safe, right? So you have to have the code or the proper account or the proper set of permissions and roles to be able to be allowed to get in the safe. And not everyone's allowed to get in there. So when you hit those sort of harder to define test questions, you walk through your memory palace. And again, memory palaces are very personal. You could use your office. You could use your storage unit if you have one. It doesn't really matter. What's important is that when you build this, you really think through the test questions and the practice questions and assign them in a way that when you get into the exam, you're ready to walk through those rooms, those containers, those boxes, whatever you build, and you've practiced it. Because you will find that when you read the questions, again, they don't line up with the examples quite right, and you're stressed. I've taken, I think, well over a dozen of these now. And even I get into the exams and I think of myself as a pretty good exam taker. And you're looking at a timer, people, there's a proctor watching you and you start to second guess yourself. So being able to have a sort of mnemonic or a mental image to walk you back through to reassess everything is very helpful. So I'm a big fan of the memory palace idea, and I recommend that if you're not familiar with them, again, you can go look at some books, watch some YouTube videos. It's very helpful. Okay, so now let's talk about exam day. So you've done the stuff, you've watched the videos, you've got your practice questions down, you're feeling pretty good about it. Here's what I do the day of the test. You've checked in, you've started your exam, timer's running. I go through all the questions once. And the first thing I do is I don't answer anything, actually. I go through it the very first time and I flag anything that I'm like, no idea, don't know what it is, don't recognize the question. And this is an important thing to note. Oracle seeds all exams with practice questions for next year's exam. They are not counted against you, but you will find somewhere between 5 and 10 questions that you probably won't know the answer to because it wasn't in any of the material you looked at. So I get those flagged out of the way. A lot of times I can tell they're probably for next year's exam. And then I go, I'll take a guess. Doesn't really matter, right? And if the number of ones I flagged is 5, I feel pretty good about that. And then I go back through the exam. And then once I've done that, I allow myself, kind of looking at the clock, about 1 minute per question. I read it, and then I look at all the answers. And what you can generally do is eliminate obviously wrong answers. And Oracle will have them on almost every question. So, for example, if you're looking at, and I'll just use overlapping CIDRs. And for those who may not be familiar, a CIDR range is an IP address range. And if I want to connect network A to network B, they can't be the same range. I can't have 10.0.0.0 connecting to 10.0.0.0. It doesn't work. Okay. And so if they have an answer that says, oh, I should have these two CIDR ranges match and then it'll all connect, that's wrong. I can just cross, maybe that's C. I can just in my head line out C and be like, I know it's not C. So now I'm down to A, B, and D. Okay. And this helps you sort of focus in on what the answer most likely is. And hopefully you know that answer, you can tick it off, and you can move on. Having done that and gone through all the questions that I felt like I knew and didn't get flagged initially, I now come back to my flagged items. So again, maybe that's 5 or 10 questions. I look at those 5 or 10 questions and I take my best educated guess at them, right? You may not know, that's okay. In an 80 question exam, or 65 or whatever it is, with a 65% pass rate, if you miss those 5 and they're really part of the test, you're still going to pass. Life's okay. But you just want to really focus on the ones you know first, get those out of the way, or the ones you're confident about, and then take your remaining time to recheck the flagged items. And then the last thing I do before I hit submit is, time permitting, I will go back through the whole exam again, question by question, and just glance and go, I answered it this way. Do I think that's it? Yep. I answered it this way. Do I think that's it? Yep. And then tick through those exams, questions one by one, till I get to the end of everything. And I feel confident. And then I hit submit. So let's talk about some lessons. Okay. Don't memorize. It is possible to pass some of these exams by just getting practice tests, memorizing all the questions, and getting your 65% and moving on down the pike. That's not going to be helpful for you in the real world. You're going to spend a lot of time going back and having to look everything up and read the documents, which you could have done the first time prior to the test. Understand why the question's phrased the way it is. Understand what the core concept is in each chapter that you're being presented with in the training, because that will drive you to be able to implement this in the real world, which ultimately is the goal for all of this. Labs are better than flashcards. Again, the ability to memorize a thing is something that in the American education system in particular, we're really good at, right? Memorize the 50 states, know all the presidents in order. What are the capitals? I could go on and on. The problem is that memorizing isn't very useful in the real world, especially not in the real world with smartphones and Google and AI. Understanding and principles behind the ideas is what you're really looking to get to. Labs reinforce that. They make you do a thing. They make you practice a thing. So go through the labs. As I mentioned before, consistency beats cramming. The worst exam I ever did, the security professional exam, I had to cram because I didn't stay consistent. My day job got in the way, training went to the back burner, and when I came into that exam, I was stressed, and it showed. The results showed it, and my feeling going into the exam showed it. What I ended up doing, and I've actually since recertified, was I went back through that exam after the fact, or at least the practices, and looked at everything again and looked at the documentation and said, these were where my gaps were. I'm pretty sure on the test. And this helped me reach the end goal of, okay, didn't do as good on the exam as I wanted, but I'm going to go back after the fact and fix that. And then lastly, this part's the hardest for me. Could be for you, maybe not. But review before bed. Reviewing information before sleeping is shown in a variety of studies to actually reinforce learning and retention. So if you can make your checklist out and look at those things that you need to work on before you go to sleep, especially the week leading up to the exam or 2 weeks leading up to the exam, you will find that you have all of this memorized. And you walk into the test itself and you look at it and you're like, yeah, I know I can't have overlapping ciders. I know I have to deploy a back-end set. I know I have to put a certificate on my load balancer, and here's where you do it. It'll help, and it'll keep you consistent and well-informed. Q&A and resources. So again, learn.oracle.com, udemy.com, lilab.oracle.com, and then docs.oracle.com/ whatever area you're studying. I can't recommend all of these enough. They all serve sort of different reinforcing purposes, but they will help you, and they will show you kind of each component that you're trying to learn. Again, doesn't matter what the exam is, there are resources at these locations to help you and to help you pass. So here's your recipe success. Use Oracle's official content first. Reinforce with third-party tools, qualitative ones, right? Udemy's pretty good. There's other sites again out here. Practice hands-on daily. Get in the labs, touch the things, do the stuff. Apply your memory palace techniques and walk into the exam confident, not crammed. Crammed is the worst feeling you can do when you walk into these exams. And with that, I'd like to pass it over for Q&A. And I don't have any open questions, but if you'd like to type any into the Q&A, I'm more than happy to answer them. I'll sit around here for a few minutes in case anybody has anything. I do appreciate everybody joining and attending today. And I look forward to hearing from you in the Q&A section. And if not, my contact information is in here. You're always welcome to reach out to me directly. Is the session recorded and available? Yes, I believe the session is being recorded and will be available for ODTUG members after.
Yes, correct. You took the wrap-up words right out of my mouth. So thank you, Jeff, for presenting with us today. And for all that are looking for the recording, it will be available for individual and corporate members on the website by end of day. All right. If there are no more questions, oh, looks like might have one. Web link. If you go to the ODTUG website and click on events, there's a drop down that says past webinars. And if that is all, we will give everyone a little bit of time back. Please enjoy your afternoon.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your attendance.